and here in the Big Red tonight to our Parent Academy. Very honored with three distinguished guests here to my left, and I'll start on the end and let Mr. Hudson introduce himself.
Hello, John Hudson. About a year with the district now. I'm one of the armed security officers at Lewis Palmer High School. 27-year law enforcement career, half of which in Los Angeles County and the other half here in as a Lewis Palmer High School security officer.
Mr. Ronk.
Good evening. I'm Todd Ronk. I'm with the school district about 4.5 years. I retired from El Paso County Sheriff's Office after 21 years and total 30 years total in law enforcement. I'm the armed security officer for the elementary schools.
And I'm Dennis Coates. I'm the Chief of Safety and Security here in the district. I've had two jobs in my life. I was a high school administrator, and I was a deputy sheriff for over 20 years. And I think I have the perfect job now because I get to do both, and I don't have to wear a uniform or ride around in a car all day. So we're very lucky and fortunate tonight. I've heard multiple times has came to our school district and done presentations for some of our students, and I just found out tonight that he actually had kids that went through the Lewis Palmer School District, so that makes it even cooler that he's able to come and help us tonight. And Mr. Allen, I read your bio and some other things, and I would shortchange you by introducing you, so I'm going to let you introduce yourself tonight, sir.
Well, thank you, first of all, for having me here. I'm the district attorney for the 4th Judicial District, which represents all of El Paso and Teller counties, so it's a really big district. I did have my wife Heidi's here in the front row, to make sure I don't say anything I'm not supposed to say. So if you see anybody throw anything, that's because I'm about to say something wrong. We were very lucky to have both of our boys graduate from Lewis Palmer High School. Our oldest is now a teacher out in the Falcon School District teaching history, and our youngest is now serving in the United States Navy and stationed down in Florida. So obviously they got a really good education from District 38 and have taken that on to serve their communities as well. And that's been a big thing for me in my career too. I served in the Navy as well, and then came into prosecution after getting done with law school. So it's really good to give back to the community in that respect. And that's just a brief introduction. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. It's all yours. We're gonna talk about a variety of things. We'll start off with social media, and then we'll get into drugs and addiction. And and any questions at home, it's info@lewispalmer.org. You can send in any questions if you're at home that you'd like to ask, or anybody here in the audience can do that too. And we're pretty much here to try to provide any information that you guys, everybody has a different background, everybody has different things in their world that they may be dealing with, and we're certainly not going to just pick what we think the top 10 are. I'd rather do what you guys think the top are, and we'll let Mr. Allen guide us through tonight. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. And hopefully, to make this really a good program, we get lots of good interaction. So if you have questions, just raise your hand and we'll address them. One thing I think is interesting to point out, when John Hudson started his law enforcement career out in Los Angeles, I don't think social media existed, did it?
No, it didn't. Thanks for pointing that out.
What about you, Todd?
Appreciate that, Mike.
Did it exist?
No,
Yeah.
sir.
Yeah.
Thank you. Heidi?
Yeah.
My cell phone was a street light.
Yeah. I couldn't resist, sorry guys. But it has really changed the way law enforcement has had to deal with issues, especially with kids and social media, and so that's what we want to talk about today. And it actually involves some of the areas that you're going to talk about at the end of this. It includes drug dangers too, and I'll talk about that when we get closer to that section. But let's just jump into it. So the FBI, according to them, they say that most crimes against children occur when an adult forges a relationship with a child and later arranges to meet and victimize that child, or coerces a child to produce sexually explicit images or videos through manipulation, and we call that sextortion. We see that happen quite often. We'll file cases on those both locally here in the 4th Judicial District, and also sometimes the federal government will file charges as well in the U.S. Attorney's Office. Most of those cases, though, do get prosecuted locally right here in downtown Colorado Springs. The most important factor in protecting children online is nosy parents. If you think back to when you were kids, when you're doing something wrong, usually it was a nosy mom or dad that figured out what was happening and put a stop to it, right? It's the same thing here, that the very best number one factor that's going to prevent kids from getting into danger online is to have parents and educators, coaches, whatever important people in their lives, adults that have better sense than young developing minds do, to be nosy, get involved in what they're doing online, know what they're doing, know who they're communicating with. So have open and ongoing conversations about online safety. Know what websites, games, or apps your children use. Regularly check social media and gaming profiles and posts. Seems like almost all games these days, there's a chat component associated with that, and a lot of things that happen bad in the community have a component involved there too, including some of our worst cases where there might be a murder and there had been private chats before that on either gaming apps or social media apps or what have you. So know what your kids are doing in social media. Make sure you're checking their social media posts. See who they're communicating with that way. See what they have on their profiles. What kind of information they have on their profiles. Do they have their actual real name on there? Do they have anything that would, maybe a picture that would give away where they live, anything like that, and get them to take that down. Explain to kids that once a comment, image, or video is posted online, it lives forever. It's oftentimes when we think about kids and the way they think about things, right, that it's very fleeting. Every moment is its own moment, and then it's gone because they're on to the next moment. But if a kid is talked into taking an explicit image of themselves or a video of themselves and they share it to a friend, and then that friend posts it online, there's in all likelihood no way to get that back. It's going to live on the internet forever. And I'm going to talk about a little bit more about that when we get further into the presentation too, about what that can look like for a kid that is either sharing that information out or is victimized by that information. Make sure that the kids' privacy settings are adequately set to protect their online profiles so that somebody that wants to get into their information can't easily find, again, private information, what their real name is, potentially what their address is. You all know that we all have smartphones these days, and any picture that's taken with a smartphone also has location data with it, right? So you can go into a picture that you take with your iPhone or your Samsung or what have you, click on the info for it, and it'll show you exactly where that picture was taken on a map. So if a kid has a picture that they post that is taken in their front yard, that's giving away, right, the location of their front yard, meaning the location where they live. Enforce a policy that your children cannot meet with anyone they met online without your approval and supervision. So one goes along with this is know who they're communicating with online, right? If you don't know who they're communicating with, try to find out to the best of your ability. If you can't find out that information, then you probably need to start thinking there's some red flags here. If the kid comes to you and asks, hey, I'd like to meet up with whoever the person is portraying themselves to be online, make sure that they only do it if you approve of it and that you're there and supervising that visit, right? So that you can stop it if something bad is going to happen. Stress that making any threat online, even if they think it's a joke, can be a crime. Things that they put onto the internet can just as easily be a threatening act as if they were in the same room with somebody and threatened to do something. We've also seen a real rise, and maybe you two might want to chime in on this part of it, a rise in what we call swatting, where a kid will call in to think it's a prank, to have a SWAT team show up at somebody's house and bust in the door. They'll call in an emergency. Maybe that somebody's in dire emergency situation, and then SWAT teams have actually gone into people's houses under these sorts of conditions, and sometimes they've actually killed people where a kid is unsuspecting, maybe has a toy or something like that, and then it leads to an officer-involved shooting situation. Really dire circumstances, obviously. There's now laws in place about swatting. Anything you guys want to add on that?
We've had a couple times this year, the FBI has notified us that has happened in some local school districts from between Pueblo and Denver. We haven't had it here in D38, I can tell you, I was a hostage negotiator for 20 years, and to your point, the most adrenaline I ever had was a huge swatting call in Black Forest, where we're going in thinking that somebody had murdered their whole family, and they were brought back some vivid images when so that's important. And to my knowledge, and you guys can correct me, to my knowledge, almost all those come through computer gaming communication. And that's something I don't want to derail, but a lot of us, and I personally, I don't remember PlayStation or Xbox when I retired 7 years ago, but I can tell you it's the communication on the gaming comes up as much as communication does through an iPhone in our district right now. Anything you guys like to add, Todd or John?
I've seen at least once a year a student make a threat, either to the school or to another student, boyfriend, girlfriend breaking up. Don't come to school tomorrow. Okay, how do we interpret that? We have to interpret that as the worst case scenario. Students are getting expelled or suspended because of words that, when they say that. So I was a school resource officer for 2.5 years here in this district before I retired. 99%, I cannot exaggerate that, 99% of what I dealt with was this right here with students and what he's talking about.
Anything to add, John?
You know, Michael mentioned something in the beginning where, you know, whatever you put on the internet, whatever you put on social media never goes away. You know, a lot of these kids think, oh, Snapchat, it stays for 15 or 30 seconds and it goes away. A warrant and one of Michael's DAs signing that warrant will pull up every Snapchat that your child has sent. So they think, oh, it's just once they open it up, you know, and they view it, then it goes away and nobody ever sees it again. Those are stored for years and years and years. So any picture they post, any words they write, it's not that type of a world where as soon as my friend deletes it, it goes away. Those can be pulled up with a simple warrant.
And one follow-up on that students, trying to educate them on is when they're on Snap and they send a photo, they're alerted when somebody copies the photo. But you can take a picture of that Snapchat before it, or you can go to airplane mode and take that picture. So kids have this false bravado sense that I can do whatever, it's going to be gone. That's how we're kind of, if a kid is being harassed, or that's how we tell them, so that but if we know that if we need to, we can get a warrant and get that information. So help pounding that home to the kids, that kids think they're, you know, they think it's gone, and it's not.
Yeah, and so on that idea too of threat and kids sometimes thinking it's a joke, if I think back to when I was in school, if there was a kid that wanted to play a joke at school and get people out of school for the afternoon, they would go pull the fire alarm, right? And then it was basically over by the next day. Everybody, you know, sort of got a free half day off. Now what kids do is they'll call in a fake shooting situation. And we live in the era now of school shootings happening all over the country all the time. And so then our school resource officers and our police departments, sheriff's office, they will react as if that's going to be a very credible threat until they know that it's not. And so they'll investigate it and run it completely to ground before they'll make the determination that it's not credible. But that has a huge impact on your well-being as parents, right? The stress that you might feel if you hear on social media or in the news that a shooting threat has been made at school, and then it leads to people rushing to the school even though it might be locked down, and kids can't potentially get out very quickly. So those kinds of things we take very seriously in the DA's office and in law enforcement, where typically if a kid does something like that and it causes a school to shut down and you know, people to be in fear for safety, typically that kid is going to come away from that experience, even if they meant it as a joke, with a felony record in all likelihood, because it's just too serious. It's too real, right? It can lead to too much psychological impact on kids and on parents, even potentially parents that have lived through it themselves in prior situations. I know a person here in El Paso County who has actually lived through a school shooting situation, and so hearing that kind of stuff can be a very detrimental impact on mental health for those kinds of people that have lived through that. If you see anything that you think is inappropriate, immediately report it to law enforcement. I would also add in that it's probably a good idea to potentially, if it involves the school, to potentially immediately notify school officials as well, right? And I see some shaking head back here from somebody that has some power over the school, the schools. So definitely make sure you're letting both law enforcement know and the school know about anything that might be inappropriate, anything that might impact safety of kids at school or their well-being at school, including mental health well-being, right? I heard a doctor recently talking about mental health issues and saying that you can't have physical health without mental health, and you can't have mental health without good physical health. They both go hand in hand. And so if there's anything that would potentially impact kids on either one of those fronts, it's important to notify people so that we can take a look at it and investigate as appropriate. There are some really good online resources. The FBI has a safe online surfing page that you can go to, and the web page is there. I actually was in my office late last week looking at the 8th grade version of that, and it's kind of fun. You answer different safety questions, and you're a surfing panda trying to avoid the obstacles. I didn't get them all right. I think I missed one. The other one is NCMEC. It's National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Really good information on that page, especially for parents to look at human trafficking, anything that could involve online presence of children with safety issues, whether it's human trafficking, sexploitation, drug use and availability of drugs on the internet. It's all there and really good resource. So I would encourage you all to take advantage of those. They're free, they're run by the federal government with really good information. So identifying the threat, cyberbullying. On the way up here tonight, I called my youngest son because he's our most recent high school graduate, and I was asking him about what are the biggest threats that he sees with social media in his experience as a recent high school graduate. The first thing he said out of his mouth is cyberbullying, because everybody has to deal with it to some degree or another. Back in the day, bullying, it didn't last 24 hours a day. Cyberbullying can literally last 24 hours a day and live in a kid's mind all the time because they take it home in their phone and they're getting just peppered with it all hours of the day and night, right? So it can have very detrimental impacts on kids. It can lead to negative emotional responses to situations that are difficult for kids to cope with. It can lead to low self-esteem, less interest in school, loneliness, and self-isolation. I think we've all probably had, if you think about it, those situations in our own lives, maybe not cyberbullying, but situations where maybe you've had a disagreement with somebody at school or work, and then you sort of have that uneasy feeling about interacting with them the first time you see them the next day or the next meeting at the office, what have you. Imagine if that angst was 24/7 and just constantly eating at the kid, and then not having the coping mechanisms in place to really deal with that stress and what that might do to a kid the next time it's time for that child to go to school. It can also lead to depression, anxiety, and including suicidal thoughts. Adult content. This was the other one that my son pointed out, that every kid that has access to a smartphone or the internet, even at younger and younger ages, they're automatically exposed to adult content. If you think back, if I think back to when I was in school before the age of the internet, you would go to the dictionary and you'd look up bad words, right? And that was really fun. You'd sit with your friends and giggle about whatever it might be. Now, they just go to the internet and type things in, and it's automatically right there in their face in raw format, right? That can have really bad impacts on kids. It can cause confusion about relationships. It can cause warped sense of intimacy in the real world, and it can cause serious psychological damage. Some of the cases that I've seen have been people that have really gone really deep into this kind of thing, online adult content, when they're young, and it warps their complete sense of intimacy, how they interact with somebody that they might have romantic feelings to, and then it leads to some really bad behavior that would probably make all of your hair stand on end. Child identity theft is an absolute real thing. Scammers can target children. And it really gets back to what I was talking about earlier, making sure that profiles are safe, that they're not putting out private information in profiles that somebody can easily get to. More than 1.5 million children had their identities stolen just last year in the United States. So that should tell you how serious and how vulnerable kids are, because they're not making sure that their identity profiles are secure and letting this information get out. And the flip side to that too is that it can actually impact you all, because they can open up ways to figure out who the parents are, and then open up fraudulent loans or other things in the parents' names, and then it can really impact your identities as well, and your financial well-being and your identity. Children can easily reveal sensitive information online that scammers can use to take out fraudulent loans or credit cards or run other scams. And again, they can do it in the kids' names, but they also can branch out and actually target adult parents as well. So the child identity theft placard there is a really good resource as well with that website. I would encourage you all to look and take a look at that.
Could I say something on that?
Yeah, go ahead.
One of my assignments with the sheriff's office, I worked as a detective in sex crimes for a few years, and then financial crimes right after that for a few years. He nailed it. He nailed it with most of my cases as a sex crimes detective was with juveniles, either being perpetrated on or being the suspect. The early years and being able to access pornography, I'd say at least 80% of my cases had something to do with that. A lot of them, unfortunately, were young females that had consensual sex with a boyfriend, and the next morning they had what we call buyer's remorse, and they're saying, "Mom, I was raped." Those were probably half of my cases, other than the child porn cases. So, and then the financial crimes, I went right into parents taking their kids' social security number, or unknown people on the internet taking their kids' social security number and taking out loans. And it ruined that student's or that child's credit for years, and it wasn't even their fault. So I have firsthand knowledge of what he just exposed, and it's spot on.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add one other thing when he was talking about kind of what I see in the pattern when it comes to bullying and reluctance to, I mean, we think as adults, well, if somebody's being mean to me, you just tell somebody. One of the things is I would suggest you all have a real open and honest conversation with your kids, and I'm learning too as a father. Sometimes they may have said something or did something in the text in the whole length of the conversation, so they're afraid, and I wouldn't say they're blackmail or whatever, but they're afraid to bring it forward because they've got some bad things in it too. And I think just relaying that message, no matter what you do, just be honest with me and tell me before, because we get a lot of times in the school where half the conversation is deleted. And usually you can tell by the timestamps in a conversation. I learned today that I have family members that delete stuff that I didn't think they would. But that's a reminder to that part of it, is I think a lot of kids feel trapped, like they can't come and tell because they've done something in the conversation. So just my thoughts on that.
Yeah, one thing I would piggyback off of what Todd was saying about the kids and the sex crime stuff is that if you think about a kid that gets that warped sense of what sexuality is supposed to be, right, and then they go carry out whatever they've seen online, who are they going to target as the victim of whatever they're doing? Any guesses? It's going to be siblings. It's going to be neighborhood kids. It's going to be cousins, other kids that are close in proximity to them. Almost every one of the really young kids that have perpetrated a sexual act on another kid it's almost always a sibling or a neighborhood friend. And it's a form of exploration, right? But it's really then trickling down. It's now creating a kid that maybe it wasn't exposed to what the other kid was, but now they've had it actually carried out on them, and then they potentially are going to carry it out on some other kid. You've probably seen hundreds of cases like that, right?
That's exactly what happens,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
The other stuff that can come up is malware and viruses. So hackers can send a link that looks like it's some sort of a game download or something like that, and the kid clicks on it, and then it actually installs something on the computer. This is really where a kid can inadvertently give access to parents' information, right? So the hacker will put that information out there. The kid clicks on it, installs on your computer at home, and then that software, or whatever it is, that hacking device, then starts to pull information out of your computer and give it to the hacker. So that's how they really get you information into your actual financial information. Emotional distress. Children who spend too much time online can have trouble coping with the contrast between what they see on social media and their real life. I think we all experience that as adults too, right? If we have Facebook accounts where we see all of our friends seem to always be on vacation in Hawaii, right? And they're living up the good life, and we're wondering, man, I wish I could live like that. But we know that's not real, right? A kid doesn't necessarily know that, and so it's tough for a kid to really deal with what real life is supposed to be like. It's not always glamorous, right? There's the dirty work that you have to do. You have bad days and good days. But if you only look at what's happening on social media, it looks like everything is supposed to be really good and fantastic and just what you would dream your life to be. But it can really lead to depression and even eating disorders and body dysmorphia. Think about that, the body dysmorphia, meaning that kids see, especially probably young women, right? They see people online that have purportedly perfect bodies, and then they have a body that maybe doesn't fit exactly with what they're seeing online, and then they develop a dissatisfaction with the way they look, and it starts to cause depression. See that a lot in kids based on what they're seeing online. So what about our social media platforms? We have, what I would say 4 big ones, but there's even more than that. Are they intentionally harmful? I think that the evidence is starting to show that they are intentionally harmful. Facebook knows that so Facebook owns Instagram, in case we didn't all know that, knows that Instagram is toxic for teen girls, company documents show. All these headlines that I'm going to roll out here in the next few slides are all slides from either last year or maybe a year or two before that. So this is all fairly new stuff. And basically these social media companies admitting that the way that their algorithms work is actually detrimental or damaging to young people. That Instagram is toxic for teen girls really gets to that body dysmorphia again, right? That idea that they see something that they don't reflect when they look in the mirror, and then they start to have doubts about why don't I look like that, and really start to hate themselves. Facebook's internal research found its Instagram platform contributes to eating disorders and suicidal thoughts in teenage girls, whistleblower says. So that's actually an employee of Facebook that came out and said, because of our algorithms with our social media platforms, we know that these things are happening based on what we've seen and how we direct information to young people, especially teenage girls. And then TikTok pushes potentially harmful content to users as often as every 39 seconds, study says. So that gets back to that where it's just that constant drip into our brains, right, with social media, where it doesn't go away, it doesn't matter what time of the day or night. Every 39 seconds, when that little ding happens and the kid looks at it, it's just constantly dripping into their head. And it's, by their own business model, potentially harmful content. And that one is dated from just December 14th of 2022. So less than 2 months ago, right? Snapchat. 20% of Snapchat users are under 18. Active Snapchatters open the app at least 30 times per day. They spend on average of 49.5 minutes per day on Snapchat. Is there anything that you all do besides being productive at work, right? Because we're all very productive at work, right? That we can say we spend 49 minutes every single day doing, 7 days a week? I can't think of anything else that I do that would amount to that. And kids are doing it. They're falling prey to that. Pictures and messages, quote unquote, disappear, making it hard for parents to monitor the activity. That is absolutely true. Because of the nature of Snapchat, it makes it hard for a parent to go look at their Snapchat account and see what things have been transpiring or being transferred back and forth between their friends or their friend groups. But like we talked about earlier, if a picture is taken on Snapchat and it's a potentially sexual type of picture, and then they send it out, it's very easy to just take a snap picture of that picture and then share that picture out. But the parent would never see that. It's also very easy, though, for law enforcement if we have to investigate a case to do a search warrant, and we can get that information very easily. Almost every single one of our cases these days has some sort of involvement with social media where there's something in there that is evidence of the crime. Bullying is very prevalent. When I was talking to my son, he talked about specifically about Snapchat, about how it can just be incessant. And most kids, they will leave the notifications on, so it's dinging all the time, no matter what time of the day or night, right? So they could be in bed getting ready to fall asleep, and then it starts dinging, and now they've got apprehension and nervousness and anxiety, and then they can't go back to sleep. So it can be very prevalent on Snapchat. And then, no surprise, I hope to anybody here, that access to illegal and deadly drugs is rampant, especially on Snapchat, but really on all of the social media platforms, but most importantly on Snapchat. Colorado joins multi-state investigation into Facebook's alleged willful practices that harm children. So basically, Colorado is involved in litigation against Facebook, basically alleging that they've got willful practices that are harming children. That's also from November 23rd, 2021, so a little over a year ago. So we have known this for quite some time. And it's just important that, again, parents be nosy, right? Make sure that you know what your kids are doing. Try to somehow throttle down their involvement in social media practices so that you can make sure that they're being healthy. Colorado expert weighs in on new law to fund research regarding the impact of technology on youth mental health. So this is just from January 5th of this year. A newly passed Children and Media Research Advancement Act directs the National Institutes of Health as well as the Department of Health and Human Services to conduct research on the effects of technology and media has on infants, children, and adolescents in core areas of cognitive, physical, and socio-emotional development. Meaning that we really want to study from a national perspective, what is social media doing to our kids as they develop? We should all know, right, that brains don't really develop, especially in males, but in females too, until they're about 25 years old. And so the things that are being programmed into their brains at these young ages, if they're infants or young children, is going to really change the way that they think about things as they grow into adulthood, because it gets imprinted into their brains. It's why kids can more easily learn foreign languages, right? Because it gets imprinted into their brains differently at a very early development stage. And so if we're pouring poison into their brains at this early stage, they're going to pick that stuff up just as easily as they will picking up foreign languages. It should be no surprise that Colorado's suicide rate is at a record high, and it's among the highest in the United States. That's from September of 2022. And that's from Fox 31 News up in Denver. Youth suicide in El Paso County increased by 54% in 2020. Youth suicide has gotten to be such a problem in El Paso County specifically, but really all of Colorado, that our coroner, Dr. Leon Kelly, has actually spearheaded an effort to really drive that number down, and he's been successful to make it plateau. But it's really going to take a societal change in making sure that our kids are being raised in a healthy way, making sure that the negative impacts of social media aren't causing kids to get into this desperate situation where they're actually considering committing suicide. And then I mentioned Snapchat and drugs. Colorado Springs woman suspected of providing fentanyl to a teen, resulting in overdose death of a Mitchell High School student. Has anybody heard of that case? Yeah, some nods, heads nodding. So basically what happened there was 3 Mitchell High School girls at school reached out to a person on social media and were able to obtain 3 oxycodone pills. That's what they were looking for, but they were laced with fentanyl, deadly fentanyl. One of the pills was a deadly dose. The other two were not necessarily deadly. The one girl that died essentially died at her desk. She took the pill in the bathroom, went back, sat down in her class, and immediately passed out, started frothing at the mouth, can't get oxygen in. By the time she got to the hospital, she was essentially dead. There was no way that she was going to be saved. The other two girls luckily didn't get quite that deadly dosage, but became very sick. They ended up being flipped and used as witnesses against the dealer to figure out who that person was and prosecute that person. But it was so easy for those girls to go onto social media and find deadly fentanyl-laced pills and take them back to the school. And it's happening in every single one of the schools in our area every single day. So this is a video that talks about bullying. It's from a Denver news production, and hopefully we get sound here. Nope.
Mark, give him a second.
Let's see if we can try this again. Okay.
There you go.
Oh.
Her new law is named after a Highlands Ranch girl who was bullied online, nearly died after attempting suicide. Kiana's Law. It was her parents' way of turning something good out of something so tragic, and they invited me into their home to share Kiana's story.
You're pathetic and mean nothing.
They are words that can be incredibly painful,
No one likes you at school.
especially for a teenager
You're disgusting.
dealing with depression.
Everyone hates you.
For 14-year-old Kiana Ariano, those words were devastating. This is 16-year-old Kiana now.
Hi, Kiana.
2 years and 2 months after trying to take her own life. It was a Sunday afternoon in this house.
Hey, sunshine.
Only Kiana and her dad were home that day.
Went to see if she wanted something to eat. Went back downstairs because she wasn't on the couch when I first went down there. And then that's when I found her in the other room. So had to call 911 and start CPR.
Their lives changed forever.
There was some times in the when she was in ICU where it was pretty bleak, of the things they were talking about.
A lack of oxygen left Kiana needing round-the-clock care, a feeding tube, and because of a severe brain injury, communicating only with her eyes.
Can you look at your machine, sweetheart?
Those steel blue eyes, taking it all in. And us, too.
Can you tell Anne hello? Look at the red.
Hey, how's it going?
That's nice.
What were your dreams for Kiana, for your family?
I remember she and I used to banter and tease about her being an attorney or a doctor or, she was super smart, super good at school.
They knew their daughter was struggling with depression and were dealing with it. What they didn't know was that Kiana was getting hateful texts.
It wasn't until, day 2 or 3 of when we were in the hospital for the attempt that came to light. A friend of hers shared it with me and shared the screenshots with me of, what was said. 1, 2, 3.
Cyberbullying had sent her into a spiral, and her family had no recourse, no one to hold accountable. That's where Kiana's Law comes in. Taking words and turning them into something positive.
When it was renamed after her, how she smiled, and that was our sign that we knew we had done the right thing.
And now a family so grateful to still have their Kiana in their lives. I know one of the things, Christy, you talked about is how this man is your hero.
Absolutely.
Two things you do well, you're amazing.
Sorry. She wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for him. He did things that I don't know if other people could have done it. So I didn't think it was lucky he was here that day.
It's tough.
Sorry.
Never been so scared in my life.
Suicide and bullying, topics people don't want to talk about, but the Arianos say you have to talk with your kids and find help. Kiana's Law makes cyberbullying a misdemeanor harassment charge, and bullies could be fined up to $750 and 6 months in jail.
So if that doesn't drive home just how damaging cyberbullying can be for kids, I don't know what will. You can just see the detrimental impact that that family is going to have to deal with for the rest of their lives. Luckily, they still have their daughter. It could have easily gone the other direction. The other part of what we're seeing with kids these days is that juvenile violent crime is shooting through the roof. I will direct you to our website, the DA's office website, and you can actually pull up some crime stats yourselves. If you go to da4colorado.gov and then click on the data dashboards link, you can scroll through our live data dashboards that are current now. Some of those have case indicators, so you can pick on juvenile crimes and see what types of juvenile cases we're prosecuting here in the 4th Judicial District. If you do that, you'll see that it includes every single type of crime. It will include murder cases. It will include sex assault cases. It will include drug distribution cases. It will include stealing cars. It will include drug distribution. Everything that you could possibly think of that is negative is happening, and kids are committing those offenses. I don't know if you all saw, I'm not going to talk about anything beyond the investigation that was mentioned in the news, but there was the big shooting out in Falcon just this weekend, right? Saturday night. 14-year-old kid was killed in that situation. What was a 14-year-old kid doing out in that sort of environment to be in a position of being targeted? Leave that all up to you, but needless to say, we've got to do a better job of making sure that all of our kids are in a good position and not just the ones that we have in our own homes, right? So violent crimes committed by young people have risen sharply during the last 5 years, a climb that has sociologists studying the consequences of a virtually connected but physically isolated society and the long-term effects of the coronavirus pandemic. You can't ignore the interconnectedness of all of those things. The fact that we have kids that are interacting now on social media more maybe than in face-to-face, especially as it happened during the pandemic when everything was locked down. And so then maybe they're losing the ability to cope and to interact in a positive way, to figure out how to solve disagreements in a positive way as opposed to going to the most violent potential option. So just again pointing out how dangerous social media can be for kids and things that we need to be watching out for. The percentage of young people sent to a Division of Youth Services facility for a violent crime was 35% in 2021, climbing to 41% in 2022, and that's according to the Colorado Agency on Division of Youth Services. So again, reflecting the idea that violent crime is on the increase, that more kids are engaging in violent crime and being sent into state-run institutions to serve out some sort of a sentence as a result of what they've done. So a couple of the statutes that interact with social media, harassment and cyberbullying, you all already saw the Kiana Ariano law, but harassment is intentionally harassing someone via phone, text message, or social media sites. It's a Class 2 misdemeanor, punishable by up to 364 days in jail and a $1,000 fine. Stalking, though, can also be at play, and that's directly or indirectly making repeated communications with another person or their family or intimate partner that causes them to suffer serious emotional distress. Serious emotional distress, by the way, is not defined in any statute. What it really means is that a person has to change something about what they do normally. So if a person used to take the same route home and then because of this contact, they start varying their routes, that can be enough to prove serious emotional distress. Or they put a bunch of cameras up on their home because they're worried about what this person is saying to them. That can be enough to prove serious emotional distress. Or fear for their safety based on a credible threat of harm. That's a Class 5 felony, so now we're talking about a much more serious offense. Or if they get more than one, it's a Class 4 offense for repeat offenders. A repeat offender, by the way, is mandatory prison, so they're going to do some time if they get convicted of stalking more than one time. On the first offense, it's just potential prison sentence. So social media and drugs, we've already talked a little bit about that, but it's really important that you all know the dangers associated therewith. Researchers show the ease of social media drug dealing. Report that not only did Instagram allow the hypothetical teen to easily search for age-restricted and illegal drugs, but the platform's algorithms helped the underage accounts connect directly with drug dealers selling everything from opioids to party drugs. So opioids are basically heroin. They're basically fentanyl, anything like that, and party drugs like ecstasy. So there was a study done, that's what this is talking about, And these people that were pretending to be teens were very easily able to find drug dealers on Instagram just by using some very specific keywords. This is on the left side of the screen where it says 4 out of every 10 pills with fentanyl contain a potentially deadly dose. So that's what a broken up fentanyl pill looks like on the street. It looks exactly like an oxycodone pill would look. It'll have an M stamped on one side and 30 on the other side. At the early stages of the fentanyl epidemic, they were saying that 4 out of every 10 pills contained a potentially lethal dose of fentanyl. What we now know is that it's actually 6 out of every 10 of these counterfeit pills contains a lethal dose of fentanyl. So it's actually much worse than we first determined. The amount that's on the tip of that pencil is a deadly amount of fentanyl from that pill or on that penny. So just to show you how little amount is necessary to kill somebody. It's especially acute, that small amount, for people that haven't experienced fentanyl before or an opioid before. They haven't built up a tolerance. We do have people in the community that have built up a tolerance and are addicted specifically to fentanyl, and so they look for that sort of drug. Even them, though, if they get too big of a dosage all at one time, can fall victim to an overdose event and be killed by the drug. The common street names and slang are on the right side of the screen, including what you might see in text messages or social media posts. So if you see any of those things in your kid's phone or on Facebook or anything like that, that likely means that somebody was either trying to sell them an illicit drug or they were actively looking for an illicit drug. If you think about the types of drugs that people might be exposed to, some things are probably more appealing to kids than other things, right? So if you think about a heroin user, if you think about what that looks like, it's typically going to be somebody with a little piece of tin foil and they're boiling it and then injecting it into their bloodstream. A kid who is getting into experimentation with drugs is probably not going to go to that level because it's not as appealing, right? It seems more dangerous, it seems dirty, but if they get one of these blue pills, it's really easy, especially in today's culture where a pill exists for almost every ill that we might have, to take one of these pills and feel like they're going to be fine taking that pill. The problem is that almost all of them are counterfeit, and you can't tell one pill from the other which one is going to be the deadly pill and which one isn't. Anything that you guys want to add to any of that? Todd?
Basically, these are not pharmaceutical companies making these drugs. These are people in a house with a mixing bowl, putting in their ingredients and mixing it like this. So as the 3 girls at Mitchell, one has a lot more fentanyl than the other because that's just how they mix it. And then they have their little hand press pill maker that if the school nurse were to look at it and it has a P on it, and you look in the book and it says P is, ibuprofen. Oh, so they're allowed to have it. So they can make whatever these pills color or stamp that they want, and that's how lethal doses get in some pills and not in others.
And just to give you an idea how easy it is, we've had to change our school's policy on DoorDash and those type of things for things that are being delivered. It's that easy. So amazing to me. Without getting into too much details, I can tell you of within the last 2 years of a middle school girl who, this isn't always the 60-year-old guy with 3 heads in the bottom of a basement. This was a local kid who most parents would think was a good kid, and they had a system set up where he would just come and put stuff in the mailbox outside their house. She would go out and get it, and parents never knew, and that went on for over a year. So that was a wake-up call to me, that call a couple of years ago. So.
As a prosecutor, yeah.
Are they blue or white color, or are they any color?
So actually, they started out that we were seeing almost all blues. So kids would look for blues or M's or 30s. But what we're starting to see now is that they're actually coming in different shapes. They're coming in different colors. They could be multicolored. They could be almost like a tie-dye look to them. They can come in what look like Smarties, like candies. We've even seen, not in Colorado yet, but in other places, that they look like Skittles. It is so easy for these cartels, really, that's who's pushing these things into our area, to mimic other things and then get them into kids' hands. The Xanax up here in the middle there, I had a murder case that involves Xanax where some kids on a Friday night were looking to have a good time, and so they got onto Facebook and found a guy that was selling Xanax bars on Facebook, and so they arranged to meet up. This was down in the Fountain Widefield area, and so they meet up in a parking lot outside of an IHOP. The kid that wanted the drugs didn't have any money, and so he had counterfeit money, and he gives the drug dealer the counterfeit money. The drug dealer gives the drugs over, but then he realizes that the money that he's just received for that drug deal is counterfeit. And so he starts chasing the kid around, trying to get his drugs back, and can't catch him, and so he pulls out a handgun and shoots him and kills him. Every drug dealer out there, for the most part, they want to protect what is going to bring in the money, the drugs, right? They also want to protect the money that they're getting for the drug sale. And so almost every drug dealer out there is carrying a firearm of some kind, and they're generally speaking willing to use it. I'm sure both of you guys have had instances of stopping drug dealers and usually having firearms on them.
Long are the days of, when you look at law enforcement in the 80s or even in the 90s, the heroin addicts, like Michael said, with the heated up spoon and tying themselves off and injecting them in a vein or injecting in the neck, or crack cocaine being smoked through a straight shooter. The drugs that we are starting to see out on the market, and especially the teens, are the pharmaceuticals. They're just so easy to hide. Michael talked about how initially they were blues. I mean, that's the street name for them, the blues, the M&Ms, the M's. Those were the markings on it. Well, as law enforcement starts to get wise with that and start cracking down with that, they change colors, they change shapes. You look in your medicine cabinet, and if you find a pill somewhere in your home that looks nothing like what's in your medicine cabinet, you may have a problem. The problem that we were seeing with this type of a narcotic is it can also be airborne. It can get into your system by mere pores, by touching alone. My last 15 years in law enforcement was spent here in the town of Monument, and I retired as a commander, and I had 4 of my officers exposed to fentanyl in Monument. What? This doesn't happen in Monument. It happens in Monument. 4 of my officers that we had to give Narcan to that were exposed to fentanyl by way of a pill. So long are the days of seeing, in the 60s and the roach clips and the paraphernalia today has gone away. The narcotic is in the pill, and they're getting these, and they're very easy to get out on the street.
Yeah.
You mentioned Narcan. I would love to know what the district is doing to have that on site and who is trained to administer.
I'll address part of that. The cool thing about Narcan is that it's very easy to administer. You basically just put it into the nose and squeeze it, and it goes into their nose, and it's working. As to the district on
We have Narcan in the district, and my team is trained to use it, and we're currently in the process of getting more educators. Yes. Yes.
Elementary schools.
even in elementary schools. Yeah.
And not even if it was a parent. It could be a parent coming to the building, could be grandpa coming into the building. So, yeah, they're all, but we got a grant from the District 38 voiced these concerns a while ago, and Dr. Summers made it happen where we purchased some in order to get us to a point to where we received a grant. And my team is all ex-law enforcement, so they already have the training. And like Mr. Allen was saying, it's really a nasal dose. We can't hurt anybody by using it. We've had occasions where we would have used it in the past. So that was the wake-up call that even here in Monument, we need it. I would strongly encourage you all to look it up. It's Narcan Noxolone. I think it's spelled Naxoline.
It's pretty close.
Okay.
I'm not a spelling bee.
Me either. And I know those two guys aren't. But yeah, look it up. And, I would strongly encourage us just as adults. I feel a responsibility. I could be walking around Walmart and help save somebody's life, not necessarily just at school, but anywhere.
Yes.
Are kids getting this information too? Obviously, it's important that we're here, the nosy parents, but are they getting some of this?
There was actually a CERT presentation done through El Paso County at Palmer Ridge tonight. So can I tell you they've been giving you as in-depth as we've given you today? No, but we try to share. A lot of times, sometimes it's hard to get a large group of students to be focused. I know that video would have focused me when I was that age, but we continue to work on that, and we take every opportunity for a life lesson when a kid may be stepping in a certain direction to reflect and update, to talk to them and their friends and their parents. But it's always between all the educational time and everything else, we're trying, and we'll continue to do our best to share that. I see. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, and I know, and I know that's in your career field, and I know I'm wanting to constantly learn more, but the threat is real. I can tell you that. I'll guarantee you there's fentanyl here in Monument, and even though sometimes it's easier to think it's not, it's a reality, it is, and I think we're doing a disservice to our kids if we don't talk to them about it.
Just on the drive over here, I was listening to a news station, and they talked about, I didn't hear where the city was, but a city bus, they found an abandoned bag that contained 100,000 fentanyl pills in it. And they're trying to track down who owned this bag or who left it there. But can you imagine, a kid getting on that bus or getting that stuff? Back in New York, there was a young teenager, I think maybe 13, maybe even as young as 12, was selling fentanyl out of his house and died from it, and had hundreds of baggies of fentanyl pills in his bedroom, and his parents had no idea. His parents were not being good, nosy parents, right? Colorado mother among 28 families suing Snapchat over loved ones' fentanyl deaths. That's just from January 17th of this year. The complaint alleges that Snap Inc., which is the company that owns Snapchat, failed to provide a warning to minors and parents about the dangers of using the platform. It alleges that the Snapchat app is a widely used conduit for drug dealers to promote the sale of fentanyl-contaminated drugs to vulnerable minors and young adults. So one of the weird things that we've seen as an outgrowth of the fentanyl epidemic is that the average age of overdose death has plummeted in the last roughly 2 years. It used to be in the mid-40s, average age of overdose death. Now it's in the low 30s, roughly 33. That means that more kids are dying of fentanyl overdose than ever before, driving a rapid decrease in the average age of death down. To see it drive down that quickly, that many years, is pretty remarkable, and it should tell you just how easy it is for kids to get a hold of fentanyl.
And I think that's the scariest part about it is they don't even have to be looking for it. It can be in anything. And like I said, just the dust. I know, police officers just on traffic stops searching a vehicle, moving something, the dust is enough. And it's really scary. And if you're not aware of it, I guess do a little research. Social media does have positives. You can research.
Absolutely.
We can find out things to help us too.
So what happens if somebody is found to be in possession, a student is found to be in possession? Basically, local law enforcement will investigate it, probably starting with SROs moving to the local law enforcement agency. And then they'll file the case with the DA's office. The DA's office ultimately makes filing decisions on felony charges. On misdemeanor charges, we don't. That's basically made by a summons or where the police issue a ticket, essentially. But on a felony charge, they actually send the reports and affidavits to us, and then we make a decision to charge or not charge based on what's presented there. And then we file the appropriate charges if the evidence supports it. What happens with a case is sort of a case-by-case basis. Because of the prevalence of fentanyl and the impact it's had on our community, we've actually changed the way that we're dealing with those particular cases. So if somebody distributes fentanyl and it causes somebody to die, we're saying that we're starting at that person needs to go to prison, just like as if they had actually committed a murder, because they're dealing poison that they know is potentially going to kill somebody. If somebody's distributing fentanyl and it doesn't necessarily kill somebody, but we catch them in the act of distribution, prison should be on the table, but case by case, again, we'll determine whether that person goes to prison or not. And so that's kind of how we deal with all these types of cases. We do look at diversion for kids because we do believe that kids should have the option to be rehabilitated, right? That they can learn from whatever they might have done wrong. That's how we all learned as kids. We just had a safer way to do it back in the day than kids do now. It wasn't quite as life and death as it is these days. So we'll look for ways to get kids into diversion. Interestingly, I forgot to mention in the sextortion or the sharing of videos or like sexually explicit videos or pictures of kids. If a kid does something like that, we used to have, and we still actually do have a diversion program. So if somebody did that, a kid shares a picture of themselves to somebody, technically, that's distribution of child pornography, right? If it's somebody that's under the age that they can consent to that kind of thing. If an adult shares child pornography, that's really serious. But with a kid, we determined that they're probably not really thinking long-term about what the impacts of this is going to be on somebody. So we would put them into a diversion, meaning that no charge would actually get filed unless they did it again, and then we would file both cases. The law actually changed on that sort of incident now, where a kid has to be offered the option for diversion. We'd already been doing it. Some jurisdictions just didn't have the option to do that. Typically the smaller jurisdictions that didn't have a big office to handle that sort of work. But you look at all types of cases as it relates to kids and try to figure out what the best option is for a kid and sort of drive them towards that, with the idea that all juvenile law cases are really designed to rehabilitate the kid and keep them from making bad decisions in the future. And with that, all the tough questions, as we agreed at the beginning, go to these two guys, right?
There's a story I'd like to share because that hit home with me. And the scariest thing about fentanyl or any prescription, I do believe, I think Mr. Hudson had said earlier that it's, in our day, in my day, it was cigarettes and maybe marijuana. It really has gone to a pharmaceutical. It's a pill. And I had a friend in the district who said that, she'd spent like a whole hour talking to her daughter about the fact that, don't take pills from anybody, don't take pills from people. And like a day or two later, she came home and said, Mom, I had a really bad headache today, but I made it. Well, what'd you do? Well, my friend gave me aspirin. It can be that simple, and maybe the student who had the aspirin got it from somebody else, or it doesn't always have to be, the three-headed guy involved in this. It can be something as simple as that. And that story's really stuck with me as we're talking about that. And one other thing that I just wanted to mention, and I feel like they've all got kids that are grown. I've still got a preteen and a teen, so I'm still learning as I go. But one of the things too that I think I'd be remiss if I didn't mention is twofold. One is kids have fake accounts. They have the account that you know about, and they have another account that has an extra dash or an extra dot or an extra letter in it that their friends have.
True.
And that's and that's usually where obviously they're doing, if they're getting sent anything or if they're sending stuff, it's in that account. So if you're bored someday, you know, tweak the name a little bit, or if they have a nickname, and know that when you're checking your friends' social media accounts, they can change the name of that from whoever it is to whoever they want it to be. So if you have people you know that you wouldn't want them to be friends, and you're looking in their phone and they say, no, they're not friends with them, they can change those names in their app to be whatever they want it to be. So those are a couple thoughts as Mr. Allen was talking about those things that I know it seems like we try our hardest sometimes, and there's always one step ahead of us. And I don't know how many times a parent comes in and, you know, their son or daughter has done something, and we talk about it, and they kind of hand me the phone or whatever, and they say, well, can you check? I mean, if we're given, you know, I almost relate it as I feel safer giving my daughter the keys to my truck than I do sometimes giving her a key to the world, so to speak. So a couple thoughts that went through my head.
Yeah, if you really think about it, these phones give our kids access to the raunchiest red light district ever, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, right? Without us even knowing that they're looking at whatever it might be, and they're should be just safe in their bedroom, right? So
Did
it's
you
just
have a question, ma'am? I'm sorry.
Can I piggyback on that? So when I started out here as a school resource officer in 2016, sorry, thanks. I had a few parents over the years before I retired call me at the school and say, my student is dealing with this and this. And like I said before, it was mostly having to do with this. They did not like me telling what I told them. No, if you know most cops, we are not politically correct. We're not. We are in your face, tell it like it is, we're not going to sugarcoat it. So I'm going to do that now. Thank you, sir. I told parents, why does your student at 15 years old have a phone? When I was in school back in Bedrock days, we went to the office and said, may I please use the phone? I missed the bus. Yeah, dial 9. Or I drove around till I found a gas station that had a phone long enough that I could sit in my car, put a quarter in. So I actually had a mom tell me, what do I do about this bullying that my kid is going through? And I said, your daughter was part of the problem. Take that phone away. She yelled at me, and she said, I am not going to punish my daughter. You wanted an answer, I gave you how to fix it, and you didn't like it. She still had problems for years, for a couple more years. One of the things I tell parents is get rid of this. You want your student to have a phone and be able to call you? Get a flip phone. No internet access. Pictures can be done on those, but I know you parents don't want to hear this, but that's reality. I've talked to 14-year-old girls, freshmen, coming into the high school. And one of the things I did, I talked to all the freshmen, and I would talk to them about sexting, about drugs. And I would tell them that picture that you took and sent to your boyfriend, because he promised he would not show anybody, he showed everybody. And when you get to college, somebody's going to say, hey, is this you? And when you have a little kid and they're going to come home and they're going to say, hey, is this you, Mom, when you were a little girl? Do you know how many girls I saw in those class, their eyes got this big? You don't want to hear it. You don't want to hear that. Is your student being bullied at school? Is your student being the bully at school? So many times as a detective, I had parents say, my child would never do that. I can show you the video right now. Your student just admitted to me to doing it. Ask yourself, is it worth it to deal with this and what society is dealing with? You have to make that you have to make that decision, that choice. I can't make it for you.
We had two of them. Yes, ma'am.
I just have to mention that we've been in the district for, I don't know, 14, we've had kids in the district forever. And in this district, when the kids get to middle school, they are told that they need to use phones in the classroom. I don't know if that's continuing, but I just wanted to offer that up, that our children got phones because by the time they got into that middle school, it was considered part of being in school. So you may want to reconsider.
Yeah, I would love to ask about that. I mean, I'm assuming it would be if they had a project. I know now, at least I can't speak to back then, but now they can only use them in the office in front of an adult.
Ms. Zark, and I'm not going to be able to account for all the years. I've only been here for 4, feels like maybe 14 at times. And I appreciate you sharing that. It is not a required item. I can clarify that. It's not on any school supply list. If there's a teacher saying, hey, you might be able to use it as a learning device, where we are moving and where I think we've actually made some advancement, of course COVID helped with this, was we do now at the secondary level have Chromebooks that we issue students. So there's no expectation for a phone. Another question that may come up, and I'll just kind of speak to it briefly, is the protections that we do have for students while they're on our school sites in terms of devices. Includes things like a very strong filtering system, internet filtering system, as well as Gaggle. So we get flags anytime a student may be using a device that is on our network that makes an allusion to, could be anything, could be drugs, could be violence, could be just whatever may be going on. We get alerts, immediate alerts that enable us to respond or investigate that situation, make a determination as to what the best way to respond is. And then there's also Safe to Tell, which I think most of you are familiar with, which is an anonymous reporting system that is a 24/7, 365 system, and those Safe to Tells actually give us a lot of good information as well. So not to say that couldn't be a case at some point, and I'd love to understand that more. We can talk about that, but there's a lot of protections that are built into what we do. Now, that being said, kids are very savvy. So there's always on their phone, if they're on their data network, we have no ability to monitor what's happening in a phone transmission unless we're alerted to it again in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, let's talk more about that. Okay.
I appreciate that. That makes me feel somewhat younger than Mr. Hudson.
Yes, thank you.
Sorry, you left yourself open to that.
I think we had one. Oh,
Sorry, just to piggyback off that, I get a lot of the emails and it talks about BARC and all these other protection things. Are they actually worthwhile?
I believe so, yes. I'm the one that's getting them, and our school administrators are getting them, and there's immediate. I mean, obviously, if it happens at the end of the day, we wouldn't be able to. But if it was anything else, we would contact the parents that night and not wait till the morning. I think Bark is a free service that I know you can put on your phone, and there's a lot. I don't want to recommend the other one thing. Just there's a million things that came through my head during the. If you aren't familiar with what VPNs are, I would encourage you to read up on VPNs so that I can't think of a good enough reason why a high schooler would need a VPN on their phone to hide their history. But as a parent, I know Bark is free, and that would be one to start on. And my son thinks I have 20 apps on his phone. I have one. Bark, B-A-R-K, is just a site that monitors where you can filter certain words. As Dr. Summers was relating, if they use a word, such as suicide or gun or bomb, and you can type in words that if they use that word, you're immediately notified. Yes, you'll get an email. You'll get an email instantly if they used any of those words you filter. Yes, ma'am.
I was just going to make a response that social media doesn't live on a device. It lives on a login that is not just on this device. So I agree. This makes it so easy to get to if the child has it. But I just want to realize my kids, for example, had social media 2 years before I knew it because they didn't have the device. Also, old phones are just basically iPods, right? And friends give them, and suddenly they have a device, right? And then also, I don't really think that the school or any parent, especially if you have like a kid like mine, they'll be in cybersecurity someday, seeking out anyone, any bar, any custodial, anyhow. But we made a commitment like wait until 8, which was actually hard.
Sure.
But we got our kids' phones at 8, and it was also like coming to an intersection where it wasn't required by school, but it's true. They're like, hey, we're taking this trip, and this is the way to keep in touch with the kids. And my kid had a flip phone at the time. Now, I was going to get him a phone, so I'm not blaming school. But they're like, I can't remember if it was Remind or what, some app.
Probably Remind, yeah.
That's how they were communicating on this trip. So, yeah, was it required that he go on the trip? Was it required that, could he have looked at his buddy's phone, I guess? And then only give it that one. But, so it feels like it's required a little bit. But I do not point fingers at the school. And also, I tried 2 or 3 different apps like Bark, and there's such great organizations. I've learned about Bark on 60 Minutes or something so cool that they do. My kids literally could hack any of those things, and then it also would backfire on parents because suddenly they'd be blocked from it would turn off right at this PM and they still had 15 minutes of work and it's blocking them from going to some site that was legit. And so finally what happens to a lot of us parents is that we just give up and turn it all off because it was such a mess. And so it's just a whole community effort. All of us are in it together, and I appreciate everyone, you guys and all of us partnering together to solve it.
Yes, great points. And the one thing you said that I probably should mention is if you're taking away the kid's phone at home, don't be afraid to let the school know because they use each other's all the time. So don't be afraid to let your administrator know.
They also have.
Keep an eye on that.
I've run into several kids that have what we call burner phones.
Yeah.
When the teacher says, put your phone in the basket right there when you come into my class, they put that one in there. But they have still the one that works. And I know because I have a drawer full of unclaimed phones at Palmer Ridge. So the other thing I will tell you is when I talked to those freshmen, I said, who had Instagram accounts? And they all raised their hand. And I said, now who has Finstagram accounts? Fake Instagram. Called Finstagram, and eyes got big again, and some smiles, and then some. Okay, So
Ask your child
It's
when
out
you go home tonight, hey, can I see your Finstagram account? Watch their reaction, and you'll know whether they have one or not. Finstagram. Just put an F in front of Instagram. Yes, ma'am.
I was just gonna piggyback a little bit on what she was sharing. I agree, none of them need the phone. They're all having them way too early. What do you say though to, we've used taking away the phones as a discipline if they've, done something that was, not allowed, and that's huge emotional distress.
it is.
They're left out, they're not part of the conversation. The next day they go to school, they don't know what happened, everybody talks about them. If they don't have a phone, the same type of thing. Like it's so hard to not have them have phones sometimes. Because I need to communicate with them, but if you do stall, we stopped giving our kids phones until 8th grade or 9th grade too. Same thing though, they suffer a little bit of bullying just by not having them.
If you can answer your question, write a book, you'll make a lot of money. I can just tell you one thought that comes to me, or something I'm currently trying, is they can use my phone.
So my 3 kids are grown. I like to think my wife had better part of doing that than me, but it was a group effort. My kids have never spent a day in jail. In fact, my 2 sons are deputy sheriffs, and my daughter is a nurse at Children's Emergency Room.
Isn't one of them spending every day in jail?
I was going to say, one of your sons works there.
Hey, they work there, they're not admitted there. I will tell you what I've told other parents, and sometimes feelings got hurt. Be the parent. Be the mom. Be the dad. You're not there to be their best friend. Oh, my friends have a phone. I want a phone. Okay. Maybe your family, the way your dynamics are, you all need that phone. Fine. But be the dad. Be the mom. I know a teacher at an elementary school that has 2 kids at the high school. You know what she does? She takes the sophomore and the senior phone every night. She takes them at a certain time. And they get it in the morning when they go to school. Why? Because at 2 in the morning, they're still doing this. And then they can't function in school because they're so tired. So I know, let's make the hours later. Well, guess what? Now we start school later. We're not doing that here, but let's just say. And then kids are what? They're just staying up till 4 now.
Yeah.
As I said. So I will tell you, be the mom, be the dad. You control them, okay? When they turn 18, they get to do what they want. Until then, you're the boss. Be the boss.
I laughed.
I step on toes when I say that, but
I'm an old man, and my mom made me and my sisters put our phone in a basket when I went home last summer during dinner. So, yes, ma'am. I think you had a question? No, I think there's a tool, and it's a learning lesson, and kids that are responsible with their chores and their homework are probably going to be responsible with their phone. And, I think we just have to be, I think that we just have to, and there's a lot of good kids that just make some poor choices. And in this day and age, a 1-second choice in the middle of a conversation and a group text and trying to look cool and trying to look smart and trying to look hip. And next thing you know, you're in Mr. Allen's building. Yes, ma'am.
I've been in tech for 26, going on 27 years. Somebody mentioned 60 Minutes, and about 5-6 years ago, 60 is, they know they're selling us addiction. We adults are addicted to it. Our kids are addicted to it. And we have to say no more. We have to find ways, even though it is hard, when you have executives that they know they're selling us technical product, and they will give it to their own children, but it's fine that our kids can have it, we have to say something.
I'm going to give Mr. Allen respect his time and give him the last word here, but just a thought as you were saying that I knew when it was time for me to stop coaching. I coached for 29 years, and when I'm riding home and I'm looking in the back of the bus and I see all the phones and they're texting each other,
In the bus.
that's when I made a few rule changes, but just drove home the point to me that maybe we've gone a little too far. Mr. Allen, you
Yeah, so there was one question earlier about what does an offender look like? And so I just wanted to pull up our data dashboard. And again, you can all get on this at your leisure back at home, but you can actually pull up and see that very information, what an offender looks like. If you scroll down to, I think it's our 4th data dashboard. So between male and female, green is male. You can see the vast majority of the offenders in El Paso and Teller counties is male. And the vast majority in the age group is really 30 to 39 is the biggest, but if you look at 18 to 39, that's vast majority of the offenders. If you click on just male, everything else will change depending on how fast the internet is in this building. Yeah, there it changed. So you can see what it looks like for male offenders specifically. If you click on, well, let me unclick that so it goes back. If you click on drugs, you can see exactly what kind of cases intersect with drugs. So there's obviously drug cases are going to be in here. Lots of drug cases.
I appreciate you bringing that up, because there is a sickness. There's these men perpetrating crime, they're sick. There's an illness, and we don't shine the spotlight on that.
Yeah.
Hold accountable for that piece. We're always focused on the victims, which is good, but we're not focused enough on who is perpetrating these crimes and what is it?
That's right.
What is causing this need to dominate and control in men? Look at it, it's mostly, you know, and I just, they're not born that way. Men are not, they are not born to dominate and control.
Yeah.
They are also, it's inside of men to love and connect, just like humans.
Yeah. No, you're exactly right. And what you're, well, it's not a system issue, I don't think. It's actually a society issue, right? It's allowed us to be where we are today, where we think we have to have these things 24/7. I don't know how we have made it this far in our, as a species without these things. Apparently we can survive without them. But go check out the data dashboard. You can actually do a lot of your own research, and if you click on any specific thing, it flexes everything else for that particular data dashboard to see specifics about it. You can look at, juvenile cases, what have you. If you go to the very top data dashboard, JD is our juvenile cases, so you can click on that, and then everything else will flex, and then you can see what kind of cases, if you scroll through the types of cases here, what that looks like for kids in the 4th Judicial District.
And I know Mr. Belchert said that he saw some of you taking pictures with Mr. Allen's approval. Can we get a copy of their? We'll put this presentation on our Parent Academy website for the district.
Yep, that lives right underneath our safety and security website. So that's the Powerful Parent Safety Academy. You'll find this presentation, a link to our YouTube if you want to go back and rewatch something. And we'll also put a link to the website that was just shown.
You want to close this out, sir?
Yes.
On this website here, when those cases get entered, is that when the warrant is issued, or is that when the person is actually arrested?
So if it's a misdemeanor, it would only show up once it actually hits the court system. That's when it hits our radar. But if it's sent to us for a filing decision, so a felony case, this thing authenticates data every 15 minutes, so it's real time. You can be, if you wake up in the middle of the night tonight, like I do sometimes, and you can't go back to sleep, go to our webpage and you can see instantaneously what's happening in the district. So it's all real time.
We'll hang out for a minute. Appreciate all of you. You guys are all stepping in the right direction.
Thank you.
The more help we get, the easier our jobs are. Appreciate it. Yes, Mr. Allen. thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, thanks.